Welcome to week 1. We'll start with our first chapter in the primary text and define crisis communication as well as issue management. Now, I encourage you to think not only about crisis communication in theory, but more importantly, how you can apply that theory to your current organization or your current position in your organization to help prevent crisis or manage crisis that can be helped. So chapter 1, your authors argue that it's impossible to avoid all crises, and I think that's true. There are things that are out of your control. Think about natural disasters, terrorist events, things that you cannot adequately or completely plan for. However, and this is the important point, some of those crises or some crises can be avoided, and practically all crises can be effectively managed. Now, public health officials sometimes describe communication as a form of social Tamiflu. If you're familiar with Tamiflu, you know that it's what we take to prevent the flu or to treat influenza. And communication can be what we use to help treat or minimize the impact of crisis management. So think about that. That is a very, very important role that communication plays in crisis. All right. Often you'll hear this term that's all good and well in theory, but it doesn't really apply in practice. I don't think that's true. And your authors do a good job, I believe, of describing why it's not true. First of all, theory by definition has to be related to reality. It seeks to explain. Keep in mind that the best theory is a simple theory. It simply describes what we can observe and offers increased understanding of what we are observing. In this case, crises. Simplicity is one characteristic of a good theory. And of course, simple theories are easier to understand, and more importantly, simple theories are easy to apply. Because theory is essentially a tool, it should also be useful, not only in generating and informing research, but more importantly, in guiding practice. Again, practicing theory. That's what this program tries to hammer home as we go through each of these classes, is that this is applied learning. Taking the theory and applying it to your situation, your organization, your understanding of that topic. All right. Your authors describe how their view is that theory is a necessary component of any effort at a systematic understanding. They believe that theory is critical to practice, and as noted by a social scientist, Kurt Lewin, in 1951, he observed that there is nothing so practical as a good theory. Again, putting good theory to practice. All right, so that's our text. We also have 2 articles. I'll start with the first one, Crable and Wiebert, Managing Issues and Influencing Public Policy. The authors of this article explore 3 major topics. I'll highlight them and let you get into the details for the sake of brevity. They start with the basic misunderstanding that some people have about issues management and policy influence. Second, the management of an issue's status. And then third, the presentation of a catalytic model of issue management and policy influence. Some heavy terms in there. It'll make more sense when you read the article. Just understand that those are the 3 things that Crable and Wiebert are exploring in that article. Now, some of the highlights that I pulled out included this nugget. Issues may be resolved in the sense that there is a temporary answer, but they are never solved in the sense of a final answer. This is especially important when you're dealing with crises. Sometimes people breathe a sigh of relief and say, whew, that issue's gone. And then it creeps up again. And I will tell you, nothing is so hard to deal with than a crisis that revisits itself. Even if the public is patient and understanding, or even empathetic, the first time a crisis hits, the second or third or multiple times that an organization deals with the same crises, not good. So make sure that you keep that in mind. Those all issues may be resolved, but they're never truly solved. Okay, the authors of the study also describe how agenda setting plays a role in crisis communication. For those of you who may have an undergraduate degree in communication, perhaps you have another master's degree in communication, or have otherwise studied communication, you're probably familiar with agenda setting, which basically says that the media cannot tell someone what to think, but it does influence what people think about. And so that's especially informative when you think about crises communication, because if the media is covering an issue, again, you're not going to change someone's opinion about that issue typically, but you bring it to the forefront. People become aware of the issue, and that issue could become a crisis. All right, our second article this week is Gaunt and Ohlenberger's article called Issues Management Revisited, a tool that deserves another look. They talk about this notion that issues management is sometimes misunderstood, in particular as it's frequently confused with crisis management or risk communication. Look, don't get bogged down with all the differences in terms. Just understand the taxonomy that we're trying to get across, that your authors are talking about, that the authors in this article discuss. Understand the different terms that we're going to go over, but don't get bogged down with those terms. Again, it's more about how you apply the theory than it is understanding every nuance within the theory. All right, so the authors of this article, again, the Issues Management Revisited article, take us back to 1978. This is when the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration recommended to Firestone that they recall 11 million tires. That's $275 million in 1978 dollars, so a lot of money. Firestone ignored those recommendations, and it wound up costing them a lot more. Not only a lot more money, but more importantly, their reputation. And so there's a good lesson to be learned in terms of that Firestone example, and that's what the authors use to kind of highlight the ideas that they're expressing throughout that article. All right. Another part that I pulled out from that article includes the idea that executives report spending more than half of their time on issues management. So that's a lot, right? If you are advising an executive, which most of us do in public affairs or some sort of communication job, keep in mind that that person is spending usually about half or even more than half of their time dealing with these issues management, whether it's crisis management, government regulations, social responsibility issues. And so we need to be focused on that as professional communicators in order to help our executives do what they need to for the organization as a whole. All right, one last point, and that is to focus on the practical uses of these terms. That's how I kind of started the video. I want to end it as well. It's all about applying what we learn. So as you learn different theory, maybe pick up some new terms, those are all great, and it's part of what we want to emphasize, but the bigger emphasis is on how you apply that theory, how you apply that learning. All right, as I do with all my videos, I will encourage you to do three things. One, stay ahead with all your assignments, stay engaged in the discussion board, and most importantly, enjoy this time of learning.